My son, pay attention to my wisdom and turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey. Her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she's bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she doesn't know it. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Don't turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Don't go near the door of a house, lest you lose your honour to others and your dignity to one who is cruel. Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich the house of another. At the end of your life, you'll groan when your flesh and body are spent. You'll say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I wouldn't obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors, and I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. Drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares, let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breasts satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. Why, my son, be intoxicated with another man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of a wayward woman? For your ways are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all your paths. The evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them. The cords of their sins hold them fast. For lack of discipline they'll die, led astray by their own great folly.
Morning, everyone. My name's Rob, one of the pastors here. If we haven't met before, I'd love to catch up with you after the service. Me and my wife, Sally, we have the privilege of meeting with couples as they journey towards their wedding day and their marriage. We do marriage prep with them. And we do 3 sessions before the wedding day, and then I expect them to invite us over their house afterwards, because I'll do anything for a free meal. What we do is we talk through the theology of marriage, what the Bible says about marriage. We'll talk about personality differences and expectations for marriage. We'll tell them all about our big mistakes and our hot tips. And then on the 3rd week, we catch up together and then we separate into boys and girls and we talk about sex. And we realized after speaking with a number of Christian couples, young and old, that sex is often not something that is spoken about either before or after marriage with anyone. And kind of realize that if it's something that really affects marriage and it's not being spoken about, then where are they learning about it? Maybe TV, maybe social media, maybe from the movies, maybe from pornography, or maybe not at all. If I asked you the question, where did you learn about sex? Don't answer out loud. Where was it? Maybe from your parents, maybe not at all. So we realized we need to open the conversation. Now, sex is often a taboo or silent topic in churches, especially from the front of church. But the Bible actually has a lot to say about it. But our culture, on the other hand, thinks life is all about sex. It's obsessed with sex. Life is sex. Sex is life. It's the goal of humanity. It's the ultimate measure of success. Sex is used pretty much to sell everything, right? From food to cars, from coffee to even coffins. Would you believe it? But sex is a powerful human experience. And it's almost no surprise that when people do away with God, sex is the thing that begins to define and determine who they are. Well, in a highly sexualized world where marriage is being redefined and deconstructed to suit the desires of people striving to satisfy their longings for intimacy and love, what wisdom does God have to speak into that for us? Proverbs. Proverbs is God's gift to us, for us to learn how to live healthy, fruitful lives in God's world as we let His view of His world shape the way we think and live. Now, I could say so much today about marriage, and there's so much in the Bible about marriage. There's so many songs I could sing today, but I'll hold back. There's so many things that you're probably wanting to hear or expecting to hear about a talk on marriage. But today I'm going to ask 3 questions and see what Proverbs has to speak into those questions. These are the 3 questions I'm going to ask. Firstly, what's sex for? Secondly, what's marriage for? And thirdly, what then is the place of singleness? How does singleness fit into it? Now remember, Proverbs is, just as we heard in that reading, it starts out as a father speaking to his son about how to do life well, giving him advice. It actually finishes with a mother giving advice to her son about how to do relationships well as well. So it's kind of encapsulated in parents' advice to their children. But here in the beginning, it's probably Solomon reflecting on the wisdom that his father David has given him, and he's thinking about passing that on to the next generation. And here we just happen to be listening in to the chat about the birds and the bees. And so first question, sex, what is it for? Have a look at chapter 5 with me, the second half of what we had read out. Drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares? Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breast satisfy you always. May you be ever intoxicated with her love. Now, the picture here is of a personal fountain that someone has, and it's continually flowing for them. It's for them alone. It's not to be shared with anybody else. This fountain image, I think we've got a picture of a fountain. It's a metaphor for the blessing of marriage. It's quite a beautiful picture, isn't it? The way a fountain works is by bringing water up out of itself and flowing back into itself, that it gets blessed by its own flow. And this father's prayer in verse 18 is that this marriage would be blessed from within. As the husband continually finds pleasure in his own wife, and it works vice versa, husband to wife, wife to husband. Verse 19, by being intoxicated by her love, drinking deeply from her and no one else, investing in her alone, not wanting that personal blessing they have, or they have to give to one another, to be spilled out into the streets for anybody else to have or take. And the picture is, it's within this marriage that sex finds itself being expressed for the marriage. The verses just before this, as we heard in the reading, and the following 2 chapters go on to talk about the dangers and destruction of giving sex away to other places, other people. Proverbs calls that foolishness. And chapter 7, verse 27 says, it's a highway to the grave. It leads only down to the chambers of death. God's wisdom is that sex is for marriage. That's the place God gave it to be expressed. It wasn't given to be used outside of that. That's an abuse of it. The Bible calls it porneia, that is sexual immorality. That use destroys it and destroys those who use it that way. And I want to just stop now and acknowledge that if you have been a victim of that kind of behavior, then we want to acknowledge that that is wrong. And we grieve with you. God hates it. And he knows your pain, and he walks with you in it. And we as a church, we want to help you find hope and healing in a healthy way. And so if that's kind of where you find yourself today as you hear this, we would love to connect with you. Even Kim Morris would love to connect with you. What I want to say as well is that if you've come out of a background where you've been a perpetrator of such kind of behavior on others, that God is in the business of redeeming sexual brokenness. All of us are inherently sexually broken. There is no perfect sexual human. But as God begins to redeem our hearts in this way, begins to forgive us and realign us with his truth, Proverbs is one way that he redeems us by aligning us with the truth of how he's made sex to work in his world, which is why we're looking at it. See, in God's good design, he created us as sexual beings with the ability to enjoy sexual activity in the safety and security of a loving, committed marriage between a man and a woman. Sex is good. It was given to be enjoyed, but to be enjoyed in the right way. Now, when we think about sex, we're not just thinking about intercourse, but anything that creates or seeks to create sexual excitement in you or another person. So for some, it's a certain kind of look, or a wink, or a certain way of holding hands, or a certain touch, or a particular kind of cuddle, or dressing a certain way. It's a particularly worded text message, or email, or a flattering comment. And all of those things are actually awesome in and for a marriage, but dangerous and often sinful outside of it. Funnily enough, Larry Crabb in his book, which is called The Marriage Builder, he talks about this idea of where the sexual activity fits, and this is what he says. He says, it's a bizarre fact that many of those exciting activities which Christians are trying desperately to avoid during courtship, dating, and engagement are in fact the very things that are important in maintaining a good sexual relationship during marriage. We tend to do them when we're not supposed to and stop doing them when they would be great. Every wife's complaint against her husband. Why don't you hold my hand anymore? And so if sex is for marriage, what's marriage for? What's marriage for? Marriage is for deep personal relationship. Relationship that reflects the deep personal relationship that God has with us, his people. The relationship that Jesus has with his bride, the church. Ephesians chapter 5 in the New Testament tells us that marriage is a display of the gospel, the great love that God has for us in Christ. It's deeply intimate and personal. It's close and lovely, reflecting the union that God has with us by his Spirit, very close and personal. Marriage is lifelong, reflecting the unending commitment that God has to us. It's two sinners coming together, learning to love and forgive one another, just the same way as God has loved and forgiven us sinners. That's the heart of marriage. It's about reflecting his love. And that's why marriage is also it's designed to glorify God, bless the couple who are in it, and also their children if they have them, and also the wider community. Marriage is supposed to be good for all. And sex is to fuel that oneness relationship. Now, obviously, no marriage reflects that perfectly, right? We're all a work in progress. We've all got things we're working through. And physical intimacy will look different for certain couples at different stages of life. It's not all about intercourse. It's not all about doing it a certain way. It's about intimacy, closeness, and depending on health and age, it will look different. Sex also has the potential to create children, which is also why it's given within the safety, security of a strong marriage where the kids can grow up with parenting, mother and father. But that's a talk for another day. Sex is involved in marriage, but marriage is about so much more than sex. I remember I was in a car one day with a friend of mine who was recently married, and in the back was a young guy who was engaged. And we were driving along, and he leaned over the seats in front and said, guys, tell me honestly, when you get married, is it just all about sex all the time, all day, all night? It's just always happening all the time. It's just really excited young guy. And both of us just cracked up laughing at him and said, bro, when you take on a wife, you take on the whole person. The emotional and physical and spiritual needs. Days will go past and you haven't thought about it at all because you're both working through other things that are important to life and each other. Because of the closeness and vulnerability of marriage, it has the ability to be a great source of blessing, but also a great source of pain. You want to know how sinful you are? Get married. You want to know how sinful somebody else is? Get married. And if your marriage is anything like ours, those experiences of joy and pain are often just separated by the morning and the evening, or sometimes from 1 hour to the next. Marriage is a whirlwind. It's a life of sacrifice. It's hard work. It's not for the faint-hearted. But it's also a great gift from God, companionship, comfort, and love. Someone to notice all the things that you never knew you'd been doing wrong your whole life, like using the toothpaste in the wrong way. Proverbs 18:22 tells us this: he who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord. It can work the other way. She who finds a husband, those who find marriage, find a good thing. But I think that the word that best sums up what Proverbs would say to those who are married is this: invest. Invest. Wisdom says, invest in your marriage. Think about that fountain picture. It blesses from within. Do all that you can to strengthen, protect, build, and make your marriage flourish. You know, there are plenty of things that want to get in the way of your marriage, to tear them apart, to pull them down, to squeeze them out. And Proverbs actually talks about a whole number of them. But in the same way that you might invest in any other thing in life, your house, your car, your work, your kids, your church, your bank account, your fitness, your education, of all the things you can and should invest in, if you're married, your marriage, your spouse, should be right up at the top of that list. Next to God, your marriage is the most important thing in your life. Everything else will flow from it. I was challenged from a book recently. It was talking about how often when we think about our week, our work week, or our home schedule, we often sit down and plan out how we're going to use the week well. You know, I'll meet with that person here, I'll do this thing here, I'll put this in here, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But how often do we sit down and plan out how we'll invest in our marriage that week? You know, Monday morning, I'll do this. Monday evening, I'll do this. It's very challenged by that. God's desire is, in chapter 5:18, may your fountain be blessed. Invest. So what does it look like to invest? I think there are three big areas that Proverbs speaks into in this, and these are them. Invest in your marriage by making it God-centered. I think Karita actually summed all this up earlier. Invest in your marriage by making it safe. And invest in your marriage by communicating well. Firstly, make it God-centered. Check out Proverbs 3:5-7. This is right early in the book. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. If marriage is about reflecting God, then God must be the one directing it, right? Trying to get marriage right without God is foolishness. But wisdom says, get with God. Proverbs 14:27 says, the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. The fountain of marriage flows from first getting God's fountain of life right. Proverbs 15:16 and 17 say, better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fattened calf with hatred. You know, one of the lies that we believe when we're married is that material security will mean contentment in marriage. It'll sort all the problems out. But often, you know, all the things about money and wealth and possessions often just bring in more tension and struggles in marriage. When God is in the center, even if there's no food on the table, even if there's no table, there is still joy and love. Now, you can normally tell if God is in the center when you're both able to talk with each other about God and with each other to God. It's kind of a little test. Able to talk with each other to God and about God. You want prayer to be a regular practice in your home, as well as God's voice as a present voice in your home, having the word guiding all that you do. I wonder for you, what gets in the way of those things happening in your home? What gets in the way of prayer? What squeezes the word out? It can be a whole number of things. And this is a particular challenge when only one of the partners is Christian. If one of you are Christian and your spouse is not, it can be a big tension. You can find making your marriage God-centered is very tricky. But whether one of you or both are, you will do nothing greater for yourself or your spouse than committing yourself to be as godly as you can. Listen to how the end of Proverbs puts it. Proverbs 31:10. This works both ways, husband and wife. A wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. And a few verses on, verse 30, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, the things that our world values about marriage. But a woman or man who fears the Lord is to be praised. You know, in the end, we'll all get ugly. But godliness is a beauty that radiates into all eternity. And it's the thing that your spouse needs most from you, whether Christian or not. A wise marriage is a God-centered one. Secondly, make your marriage safe. Invest in your marriage by making it safe. Now, safety is essential for marriage to flourish. That sense of freedom, openness to be ourselves, being naked and without shame, able to be honest and vulnerable with somebody else. You know, because of the level of vulnerability needed within a marriage for it to grow, if safety is missing, then openness is closed. And that can easily happen without much effort. You know, many of the other issues in marriage happen or never get resolved, never get discussed because one side or both sides don't feel safe to be able to come to the other person and share it and open up that discussion to work through it. Things like sex issues, money issues, work things, even prayer and Bible reading and deep insecurities and things that are going on for the person. Well, what kind of things affect safety in marriage? I think some of us need to hear this one, and not just the ladies. Proverbs 21:9. Better to live on the corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife or husband. It says it again. You know, this comes up 4 times in Proverbs. Better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife or husband. And again, a quarrelsome wife or husband is like the dripping of a leaky roof in a rainstorm. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with a hand. Nagging. Now, nagging usually tells you one of 3 things. Firstly, it tells you you're probably doing something that's unhelpful for the other person. Secondly, it tells you that the person who's nagging is probably valuing something. It's helpful to maybe stop and listen in to what the thing is that they're valuing, to understand what's going on. Pri really wants the toothpaste to be squished from the bottom. It helps him feel loved. But thirdly, it could just be that someone needs to learn how to communicate better. It could be family backgrounds, the difference between coming into a family where you've always just made everything out loud and nagged each other and that was okay, or those who are more quiet. But being a safe partner also takes slowing down and taking a breath before reacting or asking questions before assuming. Have a listen to these few proverbs. Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. 15:18, a hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel. In 11:17, those who are kind benefit, isn't that interesting, themselves, but the cruel bring ruin on themselves. You know, they say harsh startups to conversations are one of the biggest killers of safety in a marriage and vulnerability. You start a conversation angrily or intense, and you'll just close down what's going on. The same thing with harsh defensiveness when someone's brought something up with you. The walls go up, safety's all gone. Paul Tripp, a Christian author, he says, in a marriage, you should never hear anything from your spouse that you're surprised to hear about something you've done wrong. Because you know more than anybody else that you're a sinner and you do things wrong. You should never be surprised to hear that you've done something wrong or something that's hurt your spouse. Not surprised, but there are more and less helpful ways to share it. So you want to create a healthy space to be able to share and listen to those things. One thing we tell couples in marriage prep is to try to let no conversation topic become a taboo topic. That is a silent topic, something that's just completely closed, don't ever bring it up again. That is, work hard to keep an open channel for every topic to be able to come up at any time in a safe way. You know, and if that's hard, to bring it up, find ways to communicate it. So we suggest maybe have a book that lives in the house somewhere where if you want to bring something up, you can just go to the book and write in the things that you want to bring up at some point. Open for your partner to see it and go, there's a conversation coming. Maybe use text messages or email until you can find a way to come together on it, a way to begin that conversation. An older Christian couple gave Sally and I some advice once when we were feeling overwhelmed at a time of life in marriage, and you might find this helpful. They said that they would try to have an intentional catch-up once a week to once a fortnight where they would do 3 things. So they would get together, at a cafe or over a tea at night or something, and then ask each other 3 questions. Firstly, how are you going? And then they would just let the other person speak for an open-ended period of time. No interrupting. Maybe you can ask some clarifying questions along the way, but just letting them speak and hearing what's going on for them, about their life, about how the kids are going for them, about God, about work, just hearing and investigating what is going on for this person inside. And then you ask the other person, how are you going? And just give them a space to share. And then they would ask 2 questions. What's one thing that you've appreciated from me over this last week? And the next question, what's one thing that you would appreciate from me in the next week or 2 coming? One thing. Not the list you've been keeping for the last however many years. Okay, you've got to be self-controlled. And then you can pray. So, you don't give any kickback on it. You just hear it, thank you, and pray together that God would help you through it. You might just do it over, whether it's over a tea or something, create a space where you can have that conversation. It's not about solving issues for the other person. When you're hearing about how they're going, oh, well, you should be doing this and this. I can't believe you did that. Oh, my goodness. Well, it's about listening and giving them a safe place to share and understand them. If I asked you the question, how safe do you feel in your marriage to share openly, how would you respond out of 10? How safe do you think your spouse feels to share openly with you? Would you be willing to ask them? Are you open or even willing to change to help them feel safer? And what would that take from you? At MBM, we believe that everyone has the right to feel safe. So if you at the moment do not feel safe in your marriage or even safe to bring that up with your spouse, please come and talk to one of us, one of our pastors. Talk to Kim Morris, a trained counselor, women's minister. We will believe you and we will take you seriously. And if you know that you're on the other side, if you're someone who's created an unsafe space in your marriage and you don't know how to break out of it, also come and speak to one of us. Closely related to safety is the next topic, communication. Now, I asked a bunch of people this week, what would be your hot tip for marriage? Number 1, hot tip. And surprise, surprise, over and over, they kept saying the same thing. Communication is key. Communication is key. Invest in your marriage by communicating well. And this actually speaks to us being made in God's image. Communicating who we are to another person by using our words and understanding who they are by their words to us, in the same way that God shows us who He is by His word. Words have the power to give life and also have the power to tear down. Be warned, your words will often define and determine the state of your marriage. Have a listen to Proverbs 12:18. The words of the reckless pierce like swords. The tongue of the wise brings healing. 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. 15:4. The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. And again, the one who has knowledge or wisdom uses words with restraint. And whoever has understanding is even-tempered, measured, safe, you might say. I've read Proverbs a number of times over my years of being a Christian, and every time I read the whole thing, I always feel exactly the same by the end of it. Watch my words. Speak less. Speak better. Every time. And notice that none of those Proverbs told us what particular words to say or not to say. As Sally often tells me, it's not always what you say, but the way you say it. Are you aware of your tone? Just as Kim shared up here before, another piece of wisdom from Kim, our trained counsellor, is that every marriage should have a yearly check-in with a counsellor. Like a tune-up. I think that was the words that were used up here. We service our cars regularly, and every year we get them checked before we allow them to go out on the road. Why would we treat our marriages any less? Maybe each of us need a check before we're allowed to go out into the world and put our marriage on the world. If you've never seen a counsellor as a couple, then do it. Sally and I talked about seeing a counsellor for too many years before we finally did it, and we were so glad that we did. It's not going to solve all your problems. We would come out of some of those sessions feeling worse than we went in. And I remember once saying in the car, just leave me alone for a little while. All to do with me, not her. It's not going to solve your problems, but it's going to give you a healthy space to speak about what those problems are and be realistic about what they are with somebody else's wise voice into it. Another excellent step is book yourself in for the marriage course. Get in on that. If you need to find babysitting and you're stuck, email us at church here and we'll try and help you. So, to sum up, where were we? Sex is for marriage, and marriage is about more than sex. It's for relationship. But life is about more than sex and more than marriage, which is why singleness has a dignified and honored place in life, whether you're single, divorced, separated, or widowed. God affirms the place of singleness and the dignity of singleness because life is about more than sex and more than marriage. Life is about relationship with Him and about helping other people come into relationship with Him, not find a spouse. You see, in a world that thinks life is about sex, that world actually has no place for single people. If sex is the most important thing in life, then if you're single, you're not having sex, then what's your existence even about? But Jesus actually offers us something so much better. Each individual person is affirmed as whole and satisfied when they find their life with Jesus. For those who entrust themselves to Jesus, the Bible describes our relationship with Him as a marriage. The marriage that all earthly relationships point us to, the ultimate union, not till death do us part, but until death actually brings us closer together for all eternity. He is our life. He is the meaning and goal of all of life. Jesus Himself was a single man, whole and satisfied because of His relationship with God, His Father, the very relationship that He's offering each one of us. And He showed us that as good or as bad as marriage is, it is not an end in itself. It is not the goal of all life, but it points us to the goal of life. That is union with God through Jesus, the true fountain of where all of life stems from. Paul the Apostle was also a single guy, and he affirmed the place of singleness when he writes in 1 Corinthians 7, I wish that all of you were like I am, single, so that you can be wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord. Because that's what life's about. But he says, but I recognize everyone has their own gift. Some married and some something else. Even Sally and I have often expressed to each other, you know what? Serving God sometimes would just be easier if we weren't married. She says it more to me than I say it to her. But the grass is always greener, right? Those who are not in a marriage want to be in one. Those who are married want to be out of one or look for something else. No, the grass is greener where you water it, where you invest. Life is about relationship with Jesus. So whether you are married or single, if your life is not about Jesus, you're doing it wrong. When your life is defined by Jesus, whatever status you find yourself in, then you've arrived at the beginning of wisdom. One last practical thing I want to encourage you this week is to read both this section of Proverbs chapter 5 to 7, and read 1 Corinthians chapters 5 to 7. Both 5 to 7, 5 to 7. Both discuss the beauty of sexual faithfulness and the dangers of adultery and immorality. That'd be a helpful way this week, even as a couple, if you feel good about that. So much more to say, But let me pray that God would help us to display whatever current situation we find in, his beauty to a world that desperately longs freedom from sexual slavery. Let's pray. Our Father, we are so grateful that you know each of our stories from beginning to end. You know what we've been through, you know what we've done, and even in light of all that, you still invite us into an everlasting, committed, deep and personal relationship with yourself through your Son, Jesus. We ask, Lord, for those who are here who are married, that you would enable them to have great wisdom to live out their marriage in a way that honors you and blesses others. We ask for those who are here who are single, that you would comfort them with the knowledge that you are constantly with them and using them, blessing them to be a blessing to others. We ask that we would be a community that shows our world the great story that you've given us, that this life will end, but you never will. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.